Hey, hi. I'm so glad you came back. Okay, so last week we were talking about legends, and we just talked about it for a minute, and then I read you the legend of Finn McCool, the story called The Giant's Wife. And I don't know if you remember this, but at the beginning I was giving you some information about legends, and one of the characteristics was that there's usually like an everyday average Joe that somehow turns into a hero. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about who you thought the hero was. So let's run down the characters really quickly. We've got Finn McCool. Now, if you remember, Finn McCool was like the coolest of the cool giants. Like, he was the biggest, he was the baddest, he was the strongest, he was the smartest. So would you say that he was just your everyday run-of-the-mill giant? No, no, mm-mm. Then we have the big, mean, bad giant, right? And he was definitely supposed to be even meaner and bigger and badder than Finn McCool. So was he just your everyday run-of-the-mill giant? No, he didn't seem average to me. But then we have one more character, the wife. Now, they didn't say that there was anything special about the wife, right? Just that she was his wife, Una. But who saved the day? Who saved Finn from getting beaten to mashed potatoes by the big mean giant from Scotland? I think it was his wife. Didn't the story say that she was clever? And wasn't she the one that came up with all the plans? Yeah, so if you're wondering who the hero of that story really is, I would have to say it's the wife. Now, we're going to jump into a different type of story, just as entertaining, and these are called folk tales. And we have talked about folk tales before in class. We've talked about fables, we've talked about folk tales, we've talked about fairy tales, but I just wanted to give you a few little bits of information about folk tales. So, like other stories, folk tales are passed down orally, which means they're told by people throughout the years. Okay, look at the word folk tales. See that word folk? Folk means people. You ever heard of the term your kinfolk? Folk means people. So these are tales told by people over and over and over again, passed down from generation to generation. Another thing is that usually folk tales don't have an author. So like in fables, we know who wrote the story, right? Like Aesop's fables. Aesop wrote those stories. Folktales usually don't have a known author because they're passed down, right? Okay. So it says there's a mixture of characters. So you could have humans, you could have animals, you could have some kind of like supernatural creature like a dragon or like a fairy or an elf or a dwarf or something like that. So there's not just animals, which is what we have in fables. Remember, fables usually only have animals in the story. They do have human characteristics, but in folk tales, we got the whole shebang. We got all types of different characters. And then last, it may teach you a lesson. It may not. There may be a moral to this story, something that you should learn about being a better person. There may not. It may just be for entertainment. So today, we're going to jump into a Scottish folk tale called Tam Lin. Okay? And this is a good one, you guys. So good. Okay, here we go. I hope you like it. Carter Hall Wood was thick, green, and dark, and people said it was the home of fairy folk. One bright summer's day, Janet, the Earl's daughter, made up her mind to go and explore it for herself. She crept out of the castle and set off down a narrow path deep into the woods. Birds sang in the trees, frogs croaked under rocks, and rabbits, mice, and squirrels scurried through the bushes. No sign of little people so far, thought Janet to herself, keeping her wits about her just in case. After a while, Janet reached a small stone well in the middle of a clearing. There were roses climbing all over it, far more beautiful than any in the castle gardens, and she bent to pick one. No sooner had the stem broken off in her hand than Janet heard a voice. "Who said you could come here into our wood and pick one of our roses?" Janet straightened up with a start and turned around. There before her stood the most handsome young knight she had ever seen. He was so charming that she quite forgot about fairy folk. Tossing her hair, she replied, "How dare you speak to me like that? These woods belong to my father, the Earl. I'll go where I choose and pick whatever flowers I like." Delight sparkled in the young man's eyes at her bold answer, and he threw back his head and laughed. "I am Tam Lin," the knight said, taking Janet's hands and spinning her round, "and today you shall stay here in the forest with me, and we shall play." All day long, Tam Lin and Janet wandered through Carter Hall Wood. They danced and sang, and by the evening, they were in love. As dusk began to fall, Tam Lin reluctantly announced, "And now we must say farewell." "I will not return to the castle without you," Janet vowed. "You must come with me, and I will beg my father to let you stay." "I cannot leave the wood," replied Tam Lin sadly. "I was once human, but many years ago, when I was riding through the forest, the queen of the fairies caught and enchanted me. Now I am an elf knight, and I must ride by the side of the great queen to protect her forevermore. I only wish that I could be a man again, for then I would surely marry you." "Is there no way to break the spell?" Janet sighed. "There is," Tam Lin said gently, "but it is terrifying and perilous. You must be very brave and steadfast." "Tell me what I must do," Janet whispered. "This very night is Halloween," Tam Lin explained, "a night when witches, goblins, and all kinds of evil creatures roam. You must go alone to Mile Cross and hide there until midnight, for then I will come riding by. First, you will see a troop of riders on black horses. Then there will be a troop of riders on brown horses. Next will come riders on horses as white as milk, and in the middle of them will ride the queen of the fairies herself. I will be among the elf knights at her side, and I will wear only one glove so you can find me quickly among the throng. When you see me, you must run to my horse, seize its bridle, and drag me down. You must then hold me fast no matter what happens. The fairy folk will cast all sorts of spells on me to try to keep me. You will be in mortal danger, but if you have the strength and courage not to let go, the enchantment will at last be broken, and I will be yours." Tam Lin took Janet's hand. "Do you think you can do all this?" he asked quietly. "Yes," whispered Janet. "Yes, I can." Later that night, when everyone else was safely inside the castle with the doors and windows barred, Janet wrapped her traveling cape around her and stole away into the darkness. It was bleak and black on the moor at Mile Cross. Shivering with both cold and fear, she found a hiding place and waited. Just before the stroke of midnight, she heard the thunder of hooves. Her blood ran cold. Out of the night appeared hundreds of black horses, bridles jangling and manes flying. On their backs were witches with sunken faces and dead, staring eyes. Next, the brown horses galloped past, whinnying and snorting. The wrinkled goblins that rode them whipped them with willow switches and clutched the reins with wizened fingers. Then the white horses came like glowing ghosts through the gloom, wild-eyed and foaming at the mouth. At the center of the riders, Janet saw the beautiful queen of the fairies sitting tall and proud. Quickly, Janet searched for a rider with only one glove. Plucking up all her courage, she plunged in among the pounding hooves, pulled down the enchanted elf knight, and held Tam Lin to herself as tight as she could. The queen of the fairies sent up an unearthly wail that tore through the darkness. Hundreds of riders stopped and thundered towards them, shrieking and howling. Suddenly, Janet felt Tam Lin grow in her arms, and she realized she was holding a huge, hairy bear. Standing on its hind legs, the bear gave a deafening roar. Still, she held him fast, and he became a hissing snake, coiling itself tightly around her. Still, she clutched him in her arms, and he transformed into an angry, snapping wolf with teeth as sharp as swords. Still, she held on tight, and he turned into a blazing branch that burnt her flesh. Still, Janet refused to let go, and in a flash of cold lightning, she saw she was at last holding a man. As she wrapped Tam Lin in her cloak, a haunting cry came from the Queen of the Fairies. Tam Lin, I would rather have changed your eyes to wood and your heart to stone than lost you. Then suddenly, the wild hunt was gone, disappearing into the night. Janet and Tam Lin were left alone on the dark, windy moor. Slowly, hand in hand, they made their way home to the castle and lived happily ever after. The end. Okay, that was a good story. And I hope you watched this. And, well, if you're watching this now, you did watch it. And I hope that we can talk about it next week in our Zoom meeting. Okay,